Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. It's been a long time since I did any EdExcel GCSE psychology paper, so today I'll be doing that. Exams are coming soon. I know you all are preparing for it. So let us do research methods practice today. The most requests I get are for research methods. So you can see I have the May 2024 paper in front of me. This is paper 2. Today, as always, as I do in all my videos, my intention is to teach you how to write the answers, not just what to write. So, definitely don't take this as memorizing the answers which I'm presenting here. That's not what you have to do. Rather, what you have to do is understand how to meet mark scheme requirements, how to formulate your answers, how to organize them. That's what I'll be explaining throughout. After I write the answers, I will upload a copy on my website. You can download the PDF of the answers from there for free. I'll link it in the description box and pinned comment below. But that again is just to give you a reference of how to write your answers. The best approach for you in this lesson would be to pause the video, write down an answer, then check with my answer. Your answer does not have to be exactly like mine, but it should be matching what I've written, in the sense it should be organized in the same way that I'm writing it, and it should meet mark scheme requirements, command term and question requirements just as I have. So if you take an active approach during this lesson and you keep practicing with me, you will end up with the best type of learning. Before I begin the video, I want you to know that I am an experienced international private tutor for psychology and I teach A levels in school. So if you want to book your private classes with me for GCSE or A levels across any international board, you can contact me on my email ID or personal contact number, which I'm leaving in the description box and pinned comment below. If you have any queries about this video, any other video, any comments, suggestions to give me, you can leave those in the comments box below. I definitely read your comments and answer them whenever I get the time. Okay, so then let's begin with the lesson. Okay, the first question is a simple multiple choice type. Let's read the question first. They've asked us to identify the ethical issue that has been dealt with when a researcher tells participants the true aims of a study before they decide to take part. For MCQ type of questions, no doubt you can answer very quickly in the paper. This is not difficult also, but I always recommend when you're practicing, you think about why you're ruling out the options as well. Like that gives you an opportunity, though it's one question only, you're able to revise all the ethical guidelines and make sure you understand all of them with the help of this one question. So that is the approach I will take right now. If I read the question, some of the key terms which help me to identify the correct answer are before the study takes place. So this has to be one of the ethical guidelines which is followed before, and it has to do something with the aim or the purpose of the study, participants knowing the aim. So now I can match with the definitions of different ethical guidelines that I've learned about. If I look at confidentiality, for example, I know it's about protecting the identity of participants. So it cannot be about the true purpose or aim of the study. So definitely this is not the answer. If I think about informed consent, yes, that has to do with the aims of the study. Participants should know the full purpose before they sign up for a study, and it is taken before the study can be conducted. So both the things are holding true for it. It is the right answer. Now, as I told you, I don't even need to go ahead and check what the other alternatives are because I've understood what's the right answer. Still, I will do that because at the time of practice, let me revise all my ethical guidelines. Let me think, why is it not the right to withdraw? Because the right to withdraw is about leaving the study at any time the participant wants without having to give any justification. So not to do with the aims of the study, though it is informed beforehand, but it's not about knowing the purpose of the study. Finally, why is it not protection of participants? Because protection is not about before the study, it's about during the study. Participants should not be harmed in any way. So again, it's about harming participants and nothing to do with the aim. In this type of question, the only requirement is that I should cross out the box in which the correct guideline is given. So I just have to put a cross on B exactly and I have to move forward to the next question. Okay, now let's look at the next question. Jason is planning to use a questionnaire to investigate whether there is a difference in the use of social media by people of different ages. Give one open-ended question and one close-ended question that Jason could use in his questionnaire. Okay, the open questions, like just to quickly jog our memory, explaining what open and closed question is beyond the scope of this lesson. I won't be doing that, but just to quickly remember, open questions begin with describe, explain, elaborate, what, why, how. Something like that I'll have to write for an open question. Closed question begin with do, are, is, or they are just statements, and participants have to rate them or they have to give dichotomous forced choice type of answers. What is important is, as guidelines for how to write this answer, for the close ended question, you must include the response alternatives. Supposing you're asking someone a do type of question, do you agree or do you do this? You must state that the response choices are yes or no. If you don't give what the response choices are from which participants have to select, it won't be marked as correct because then it looks like an open question. Okay, now key thing, many students they just write any open or closed question, nothing to do with the topic. The topic is about social media. So participants will write something like, what are you feeling? Students will write something like, what are you feeling? What do you think about, they won't even specify, like something like, what do you think about media use? They won't even make it specific to social media. I know some of you might feel that that is very obvious, but actually students make these mistakes. There is no mention of social media on their question, and it also has to do with something of people of different ages answering. So if you can incorporate that also into the question, that's the big thing, that's the best thing. But at a minimum, just make sure that you're talking about social media at least. Okay, a simple open question that comes to my mind is, how do you feel about, let me put it as, the amount of time you spend on social media every day? So that can be an open question that I'm asking. Open question is just a free response question. So if you look at this question, the participant is free to answer however they like to. I'm not imposing any response choices on them from which they have to select. So it's a good open question and it directly refers to social media usage. Coming to a closed question, I would take it as, again let me take it to do something with time only, because after all it's about ages, different ages, definitely they want to compare the time for which people are using social media. Your questions do not have to be about time, they've not asked directly. It could also be which platforms you're using or why do you use social media, for what purposes. That's absolutely fine. Right now I'm thinking in the direction of time. It could be something as simple as, do you spend a lot of time on social media, yes or no? Or I can give it this way. Forced choice does not have to be, closed question does not have to be yes or no, true or false only, or rating scale only. It can also be like this. How much time do you spend on social media on average in a day? I have to mention on average because it's going to differ from day to day. So then the participant will get confused which day I'm asking about. So I just say on average in a day. The response choices I would like to give is 1, less than 5 hours, 2, more than 5 hours. Of course, I can give more than this also. Response choices, it could be say 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, something like that. As long as there are choices, there are response options which I'm giving, it becomes a closed question because I'm forcing them to select from something. So make sure in your open question there are no response choices, and in your closed question there are response choices. What participants have to select from has to be very explicit. Also, two more problems which are seen in these type of questions. So two issues I don't want you to make while writing these questions. One, many students for open questions, they give the how much or how many type of question. That is not an open question. Even if you don't give response choices, how much or how many implies that a person has to give a definite number. It becomes closed from the wording only. So that will not be marked as correct. How is correct. How much or how many. These two are closed questions. Never try to use them as open questions. Another very common mistake is to not give direct questions. Instead of giving questions in quotes, like I have given here, how students would put them is in indirect speech. So, for example, for the first one, they would say, Jason should ask them about how much time they use on social media, about how they feel about the time they spend on social media. That's not how you write the question. It will be marked as wrong. It has to be clearly in quotes, directly the question that you are going to ask the participant. Exact wording has to be there. Not indirect, like this one should ask about this thing. Don't write it that way. Okay, so again, actually an easy answer to score. Let's look at the next question. Describe how Jason could use a stratified sampling technique to gather his participants. Okay, it's only for 2 marks. It could come for 4 marks also, but 2 marks meaning we have to give only two steps. We need strata, we need groups for stratified sampling. So we have to specify from which groups Jason has to select. We can't make up any groups. I can't say males and females. They've mentioned something in the question. I have to take the strata from there. So just to look at the question again, and we should definitely look at it again and be sure before writing an answer. It was about different ages, as we noted earlier also. When I told you that if you can incorporate the ages, that will be good. Though I have not incorporated, but if in some way you can put it, that's good. Now coming to, because they've specified different ages and he wants to do stratified sampling, definitely it's going to be the age groups which are going to serve as a strata. The only thing is they have not specified which are the age groups. So it's up to you to define which groups you want to take. Before writing the answer, let's consider what have to be the points in the answer. It's just for 2 marks. So 1 point definitely should be about which ages are forming the strata. For example, you could take something as broad as less than 18, maybe to indicate teenagers, or less than 19 and more than 19 to indicate adults. So say you're having something like teenagers versus adults, or it could be even finer than that. So say children less than 10 years, little older children 10 to 15 years, uh, later teenagers 15 to 19 years. Depends on you which age groups you want to take. The second point could just be about random selection, because after all, stratified sampling has to end up with random selection after identifying the groups. I know there are a lot of intermediate steps also, like many of you must be thinking about the proportions in which we have to represent the population in the sample. The only thing is that the answer is only for 2 marks, so we won't be able to cover everything. So if it's just for 2 marks, these are the main two things: specifying the strata and specifying the selection. Okay, so now I'll write a model answer. Jason can divide the population into age groups like, say I would like to put it as my personal choice, 10 to 15, because I believe less than that for social media use. Actually, I know children are using it, but I don't think that's very appropriate. 16 to 20, 21 to 25, etc. So somewhat like in my mind it's coming little middle-aged children, teenagers, young adults, those type. Then he can, using a lottery method, like drawing chits, randomly select a few participants from each group to be included in his sample. What is important is to indicate each group, that random sampling is not taking place overall, otherwise it would be random sample. Then there's no point of stratifying. From within each group, random sampling is going to be done. Also, specifying a lottery method to indicate random sampling is very important, whether it's about stratified or it's about general random sampling. How that random selection is being done is very important to be indicated. Make sure you're talking about age groups only, not any other groups, because his intention is to study age wise. Like I mentioned before, I just want to reiterate, I know things will come to your mind that he should select in proportion of the groups in the population. Like if some age group is a larger number in the population, he should be selecting more from that group. If it is lesser in some uh, group in the population, he should be selecting lesser people from there. It's just that the scope of the answer is very narrow. It's only for 2 marks. That's why I have not written about those things. If it was asked for 4 marks, I would have written about those things. Next, coming to Jason will gather qualitative data from his questionnaire. What is meant by qualitative data? They haven't asked us to link it back. First of all, notice this. They have not said refer to Jason's situation while answering. And one more thing which indicates you don't need to link back is that it is only for 1 mark. In 1 mark, how much will you be able to write? Either you can give the description or you can link it. Here you strictly have to define what is qualitative data. You don't need to talk about Jason's study at all. So I would say qualitative data is non-numerical information collected from a study. Including words, descriptions, etc. You could have a slightly different definition, that's fine, as long as you're talking about how it is non-numerical. Even if you don't use the word non-numerical, but you talk about it involving words and descriptions, because that's the type of qualitative data we learn in our syllabus. It will be marked as correct. Okay, then we have the calculation type of questions. As we know in EdXL, both GCSE and A levels, there's a lot of statistics involved, like calculations, maths and stats. So let's come to the maths type of questions. Very scoring. But where students lose marks is carelessness, reading it incorrectly or getting confused. Some other concept is asked giving another concept. So we'll make sure we do it correctly. Okay, the question here is, and we should read the scenario very carefully, giving as much time as it needs to read. Because if we are going to haste about reading the situation, all the questions are from the same situation. We'll end up making mistakes in all. So just read the question very properly before attempting even the first question which is given. Savannah is investigating whether there is a relationship between listening to music and happiness. She asked participants to record the number of hours they spent listening to music in a week. They also scored their level of happiness on a scale of 1 being very unhappy to 10 being very happy. Savannah sampled a total of 180 participants aged between 18 years old and 65 years old. A third of her sample were aged between 18 years and 25 years old. Calculate the range for the age of the participants. Range is simply the highest minus the lowest score. So we just have to see which is the highest age specified in the situation minus the lowest age. That's all there is to it. Then it's a simple subtraction. Just have to minus and you get the answer. You're allowed to use a simple calculator in the paper. By simple, we mean non-scientific. So you're allowed to use that. Feel free to do that. Sometimes you might just want to use it for verification purposes. You've done it manually because it's simple, but just to be double sure, it's a good habit to just double check once you do it on the calculator also. So let's look at the situation again, which is the highest age which has been indicated, 65. which is the lowest age which has been indicated, it is 18. So one thing you have to notice, these type of questions in the paper, they're just coming for 1 mark. So you don't need to actually specify like highest age is equal to 65, lowest age is equal to 18. You can straight off show 65 minus 18. Okay, and then like I told you, it's a matter of simple calculation. You can do it mentally. 65 minus 15 becomes 50. Another minus 3 becomes 47. If you're more comfortable doing it on the calculator, you can do it that way. Though it is for 1 mark, I still strongly recommend that you don't directly give the answer. Don't just do very quick mental calculation and write 47 in the range. Just show that 65 minus 18. Make it evident to the examiner that you know how to calculate. Otherwise, it can look like you've copied from somewhere. So just show that this is the working and therefore this is the range. You don't need to show anything more than that. Just that simple subtraction which you're doing. So that is all there is to this answer. Let's look at the next one. Calculate the ratio of participants aged between 18 years and 25 years old to the remaining participants in the sample used by Savannah. Okay, now they want ratio in ratio. First of all, it is for 2 marks. Secondly, even if they don't tell you, you have to bring it down to the simplest form. Just keep that in mind. Many students forget about it. Like unless it's written in the prompt, they don't bring it down to the simplest form. You just have to do it in a ratio or a fraction question. Okay, so first let's see. For every question, just give the steps that you're doing. Like I said, it should not look like you've copied from somewhere. Especially when it's for 2 marks, there are marks for the steps also. In case you're getting the final answer wrong, at least some marks you will get for showing the steps correctly. Okay, what they've said is participants aged between 18 and 25. Let's read the stem again to see how many participants of that type. A third of the sample is between 18 and 25. Okay, and what they're asking, and the remaining participants. So that means 2/3 must be remaining. First of all, what's her sample size? 180. So out of 180, they're telling us 2/3 are between 18 and 25. No, sorry. Out of 180, they're telling us 1/3 are between 18 and 25, which means that remaining 2/3 are out of this range. They are above 25. Firstly, we need to convert this into numbers. What does that 1/3 come to and what does the 2/3 come to? I will have to show these steps also. So first I will have to show 1 upon 3 into 180. How much working you want to show, that is up to you. Like, do you want to show 1 division which you are doing by 3? That is up to you. But you have to show the step. So what I have written here, 1 by 3 into 180, that you have to show. Like I told you, working, because you can do it on the calculator also. So directly you can do 180 divided by 3 and put in the answer. What I am doing right now, you don't need to do that. But just because I'm doing it manually, that's why I'm doing the cancellations here and doing the calculation. But make sure the step is there. Even if you're doing in calculator, I'm really reiterating this because I want you not to miss out. There are marks for these steps. So we know if I divide 180 by 3, 3 into 6 is 18, so 60. What is this 1 by 3 into 180? 60. 60 participants are in the range of 18 to 25. I'm writing for my own interest. If I want, I can just show 1 upon 3 into 180. That's it. No working, no wording. I'll get marks for that also. Because I'm showing I know the steps. But just for clarity and so that I keep track. You know, many times, I know I'm deviating a little, but it is related. Many times what happens is we feel I don't need to show the examiner this. So why should I write? That's true. But many times what you write helps you only keep track and prevents you from making errors. For example, when you write something like this, you are reiterating to yourself when you're writing that 60 participants are between 18 to 25. That way you keep track in your own head only of what you're doing. And then you remember, okay, now I need to calculate the remaining also. and these are not the remaining. These are the 18 to 25. This is the internal dialogue which is happening when you're writing. Many times students, what we call careless mistakes, they make it that's why because they're very in a haste. First of all, there's no need to rush up. Time is sufficient. It's not extra, but it's sufficient to answer. So don't be in a haste. Secondly, in that haste, their mind is all over the place, so they do 60. Then they don't remember for what they've done 60. They'll forget they need to subtract. Many students, I'm telling you for this answer, they are going to do it 60s to 180 because they do it in a haste. They forget that they have to calculate the remaining participants also, so they end up taking the total participants instead of remaining. So when you write down things and you keep track of what you're doing yourself, you won't make that mistake of taking the total instead of the remaining, and you'll end up with the correct answer. So everything does not have to be, do I need to show the examiner or not? You don't need to show. Like I said to the examiner, you don't need to show the working and the wording, but you need to show yourself what you're doing so that you don't make mistakes. The examiner is not concerned about all these things. They will see you have taken total numbers of remaining, they're going to mark it wrong. You are the one who's going to lose marks. Now to calculate the remaining participants, either you can do 2/3 into 180 or you can just subtract from 180. So you could just do 180 minus 60 is equal to 120 remaining participants. Also, one more thing, many students have noticed when it comes to these maths problems, there's some ultra competition in their mind that, I know, normally their students are like good paced and all. When it comes to maths problems, I have to be the first one to give the answer. That is the attitude. You have to give right answers, be accurate, don't worry about being first. I got it first in class. Be focused on writing your exam paper correctly. So whether you got it first in your tuition class or in your classroom and all is immaterial. Be concerned about whether you're writing the accurate answers or not. Let anyone come first. So don't become unnecessarily competitive. I'm telling you from experience, it is these competitive students who end up hasting and making errors and losing marks carelessly, even when they know how to do it correctly. So these attitudes which are there, being unnecessarily competitive and all, they bring you down. I don't know about other subjects, so I can't say. Maybe in maths you are required to be that way. I'm not commenting on that. In psychology, you don't need to be competitive when it comes to the maths sums. So take your time, but do it correctly. So now we've just calculated 60 is the number of participants in the range of 18 to 25. 120 is the remaining participants. They want this ratio D. Those between 18 to 25 and those remaining. So now we'll show how we are calculating the ratio. This step is important again. 60 is to 120. Now, like I said, many students are going to put the 60 is to 120 only in the ratio. Don't do that. Don't put it as 60 is to 120. Bring it down to its simplest form. The simplest form, give it as the answer. So now from the 60s to 120, directly also you can bring it to the simplest form. Or like me, you can show a bit of working. I like to show the fractional working in this. So I would show it as 60 upon 120. Then I'll show the division. 60 times 2 we know is 120, 1 upon 2. Then I'll write the final ratio, 1 is to 2. That is my preference. But just keep in mind, if you're not going to bring it down to 1 is to 2 and you're going to write 60 is to 120, you will get only 1 mark. You won't get full 2 marks. It is implied for ratio and fractions, you have to give the simplest form. Let's look at the next question. Savannah found that those listening to less than 1 hour of music in a week scored themselves at 2 or below on the happiness scale. Happiness scores increased for those who listened to more music, with those who listened to over 12 hours of music in a week, usually scoring 9 or above. Explain one conclusion that Savannah could make from her findings about the relationship between music and happiness. The thing is, when it comes to a conclusion, it has to be theoretical. It has to be in wording. Many students will just repeat the findings or the results which are given. They are not asking you results, they are asking you conclusion. So first make sure you understand what a conclusion is. Conclusion is not numerical and it's not specific to the study. So if I just repeat and say those who listen to less music they get 2 or below, those who listen to more music get 9 or above, that's totally wrong. It won't be marked as a conclusion because I've just stated the result. Conclusion, firstly, I have to see it's 2 marks, it's explained, so 2 points I have to give. One, they've asked me relationship. I think the beginning also they have mentioned Savannah is investigating relationship. Means this whole scenario is centered around correlation. She's finding a correlation. So conclusion should be about given the numbers which are there. Is it a positive or negative correlation? Instead of this, if it was an experiment, she is comparing differences across conditions or groups. Then what is the difference between the groups or conditions? That would have been my focus in the conclusion. So in conclusion, first thing should be correlation or difference. Second thing is the larger, like I said, theoretical aspect of it. How does music impact happiness? Is it that more people listen to music, the happier they are? Not with reference to this particular study. In this study, they show more happiness. No. What is this study indicating about the population, the trend which it is giving? That I have to write in the conclusion. So let's see how I can put this conclusion. Also, try to use the name of the character given in the situation and wording from the situation wherever possible to keep on contextualizing well. Savannah could conclude that there is a positive correlation between music and happiness. I'm just borrowing the wording from the question. They've asked me what she can say about relation between music and happiness, so I'm also putting it that. Now, to explain this further, like I said, I have to keep a bird's eye view, broad perspective when I'm writing. So I won't write about these participants. I will say that it can be inferred that the lesser that a person listens to music, the lower is their happiness. Conversely, the more that a person listens to music, the greater is their happiness. So, what are the common mistakes in this question which you have to avoid? First, like I said, giving results instead of conclusion. That's the most common mistake. Second is to give only one side. Lower the some, lower that, say lesser that someone listens to music, lower is the happiness. Not giving the other side. Then more that they listen to music, greater is their happiness. They have studied two groups. They are drawing conclusions about two different groups: those who listen to less and those who listen to more music. So conclusion also should not be one-sided. It should explain both the sides. Also, from the very fact that it is a full 2 marker means you have to give a very complete answer. Also because it's explained. Be thorough about whatever you're writing. When you see command terms and marks like this, it's not an identify or name type of question where you can write partial answers. Okay, that completes the Savannah situation. Let's look at the next question. Again, maths. Pedro was investigating whether schemas have an influence on memory accuracy. He decided to test 4 students from his psychology class. He placed 10 typical objects such as chair, 10 unusual objects such as a laundry basket in a classroom. The students had to enter the room and look around for a minute. Pedro recorded the number of typical objects and unusual objects students could remember. The results are in the table. So on the columns we can see typical and unusual objects recalled out of 10. And in the rows, we can see the students A, B, C, and D. Okay, now what they're asking us to do is calculate the percentage of students who recall more than 5 typical objects out of all the students in the investigation. These type of questions, when they're just coming for 1 mark, unlike the ratio question which we did previously, you can directly give the percentage step, what is on the numerator, denominator into 100, and final answer you can write in the space given. But like I told you, for keeping track myself that I'm going in the right direction, I like to involve a few steps. So I'm doing it out of my preference. Students who recall more than 5 typical objects. Let me see how many students are there who recall more than 5 objects. So looking at the table, typical objects firstly. So how many are there who remember more than 5? Only in the typical column. They are not asking for the unusual ones. So there's C, B, A. All of them have remembered more than 5 objects. Out of all the students in the investigation, so we know there are 4 students. They have mentioned in the beginning only, even if we have missed that in the situation, they have named only 4 students, A, B, C, D. So there are 3 students who have recognized more than 5 objects, and totally there are 4 students. So how I like to put it, though not compulsory, number of students recalling more than 5 objects is equal to 3. Total number of students, the reason they give you so much space also is that only, that you're free to do how many ever steps and how much ever working you want. So in total number of students in experiment is equal to 4. So therefore percentage is equal to 3 upon 4 into 100. This is very straightforward. We all know it's 75, but still to show you a little working. 400 gets cancelled, 25, then 3 into 25 is 75. You can use a calculator as we are seeing from the beginning. This could be done. The minimum step which you have to show is 3 upon 4 into 100. That definitely show in the space and then give the final answer 75%. Leaving that, whether you want to show anything or not, it's your choice. Let's come to the next question. Calculate how many students recalled less than 5 unusual objects as a fraction of all the students. Less than 5 unusual objects. This time they don't want percentage, they want fraction. So let's come back to the table. Unusual objects is the right column. And they want to know less than 5 this time. So that's 2 students, A who's remembered only 3 objects, and D who's remembered 2 objects. And they want a fraction of all students again. So number of students will remain constant only in one situation. It's still 4. So it's going to be 2 divided by 4. Here when students are in a haste, again it will seem obvious, but students do it. They will again calculate percentage because they did it the last time. So they don't read the question carefully. If I'm going to calculate percentage, it will be marked totally wrong. So I better give only a fraction. Okay, so let's look at the question here. Like we saw, less than 5, there are 2 students. I'll just write that. And total number of students is 4. So therefore fraction is 2 on 4. And I have to simplify. Like I told you, for the ratio question, even fraction you must bring down to the simplest form. It's simply 1 upon 2. So half the students were there who could not remember even 5 unusual objects. At a minimum in this one, the steps which you'll have to show, I'll just refresh. So the minimum step you'll have to show for this one is 2 upon 4. Rest you want to show anything or not, that is up to you. Now coming to the next question, which is on the bar graph. Complete the bar chart using the data in table 1, including the label and scale for the y-axis. Okay, They have given the bar chart, it's just that we have to complete it, so we don't have to draw the bars. Before answering these type of questions, we should take a good look at the graph. And what I mean by good look is noting everything about the graph, the title, the axis title, anything what is given. Some we have to fill in, but whatever is provided, first we should look at it carefully. So it's a bar chart to show number of typical objects recalled by the students. The bars are representing the students A, B, C, and D, and that's the heading also, participant. They want us to complete it. I can see on the next page they haven't given separately any graph paper, means here only we have to complete it. Okay, and they've specified. So we should read the question. What we have to fill in exactly, they've told us. We have to include the bars for students A and C. Now, for B and D, what is the data that they have got is from the table, which we had seen earlier. This is a graph showing typical objects. So, in the typical objects column, the data that was there, that is represented. Let's revisit that table. So, for only looking at the first column, typical objects, we can see that student B got 10. That's why that bar is looking very tall in the graph, which we saw right now. And D has got 5, so it is looking shorter. A has got 8 and C has got 9. That is what we need to keep in mind. So, keeping this 8 and 9 in mind, we'll go to the graph again. Okay. Now, we don't know the scale which has been used. So, firstly, we have no idea how they are representing on y axis. So, because they want us to complete. So, before we can put in the bar, we'll need to put in the scale. They've asked us to give the scale also. It just makes sense to first put in the scale, because otherwise our bar might not be accurate. So I remember 8 and 9 for the students, but before that, let's put the scale. It's very obvious. I can see there are 5 centimeters of blocks. So definitely this is going to be 1. I'm sorry, not 1, 2. This is 3, like it's going to go in multiples of 2. Then this is 6, this is 8, and this is 10. How I come to know that it's going in multiples of 2 is because that bar for student B, which is 10 on the table, has reached the highest point. So definitely I know the last point must be 10. And I can see that there are 5 blocks. So 10 has to be distributed equally amongst 5. So definitely the axis must be increasing on a scale of 2. So first I have given the scale for y-axis, which is 2 to 10. They want me to label the y-axis also. They've specified that. What am I representing on y-axis? For again, I can refer to the table for that. I'm representing number of typical objects recalled. The column name which is there for A, that column name I can give it here. Okay, so then what I need to write as the heading for the y-axis, it's up to me. I can put it vertically or straight. So I'm just put it vertically. Number of objects recalled. And they want me to give the bars. Now that I have the scale with me, I can give the bars. Just try to match the alignment of the rest of the graph. You can see that there is a spacing of about 3.5 centimeters between any two bars. So just maintain that space when you're drawing. For student A, we have seen they have recalled 8 objects. So my bar for A should go till A, because they give it like this. Like in the first half centimeter only they draw the bar. I will also draw it this way. Now, how much detailing I want to give in the bar? In the sense, do I want to shade it or not? And do I want to give it a heading? That is on me. Bare minimum requirement, if I do, they'll give me the marks. Like if I just draw this blank bar also, I'm going to get marks. I like to write 8 on top to indicate it's 8, though it's obvious. So as my preference I'm writing, you don't have to. Also, I don't like to shade in the bar, so I'm just leaving it as it is. For student C, it was 9. The number of objects recalled was 9, so I'll take it till 9. I'll just show you how the examiner is going to check this answer so that you're clear where you're getting marks. This is for 3 marks like we saw. 1 mark is for drawing both bars correctly. If one is also wrong, you lose that 1 mark. So the height should be correct. Even if your bar is a little broader, you're not maintaining exact alignment, that's okay. Just make sure that the height is correct. the height of the bar is what they're looking for. For the scale, another 1 mark. Again, scale should be correct. It should be ranging from 2 to 10 in multiples of 2. It cannot be scale is different for your bars and for the existing bars. Then you won't get marks. Finally, the label, you will get you 1 mark, and the label should match what is on the table. Don't write any label of your own. Like students will just write objects, or they'll write percentage of objects. It's number of objects. They've said that clearly. When you write something like percentage, it changes the meaning only. So best thing is just stick to what is directly written in the column. Why think about what you have to write when it's given? So 3 marks you're getting for exactly those three pieces of information which they have asked for. Next is Pedro concludes that schemas influence memory accuracy. Give one way Pedro's findings could support this conclusion. This time it's a finding question, not a conclusion. So this time they've given you the conclusion, they want you to give the findings. It's going reverse from that previous question. Here, make sure to include quantitative data. Okay, so definitely participants recalled typical objects more than the unusual objects, right? And it's just for 1 mark, so I have to give one statement. If you look at the table again, I'll just show it to you quickly. You can see definitely in the left column there are many more numbers which are above 5, like they had told us also. In the right, mostly they are 5 or below. So definitely people are remembering the typical objects more than the atypical ones. That's why he's able to conclude that schemas influence memory. I told you explaining things is beyond the scope, but just to give you a quick refresher, what's a schema? It's a mental framework. So if I'm able to remember typical object easily, that's because it's matching my schema. Unusual object, why I can't remember? Because I don't have a schema for it. I don't have existing knowledge. So that's what the study is showing. How I can put it is, participants remembered more schema congruent, that is typical objects, usually 5 or more out of 10, but only 5 or less schema incongruent or unusual objects. Let's go to the next section. That as such completes this situation. We have a new situation. I want to complete this entire section in this lesson. So what I'll do is we'll do the next section properly, and for the 12 marker I'll just give you an outline. If you want details on how to write the 12 marker, there's already a video on my channel. You can go to Edexcel GCSE playlist, in which I've explained thoroughly how to answer the 12 marker. You'll get good points over there. I've actually written out one 12 marker in that. So this time I'll give you the points. You can phrase it how I've phrased in that video. Let's come to the next question. Rossio conducted a case study on a patient who had an addiction to alcohol. She worked with the patient for 6 months to treat the addiction. Define what is meant by case study. Again, the define type of question, like we are defining qualitative data, not asking us to link back and only for 1 mark. Strictly whatever definition you've learned of case study, just write that. So case study is a detailed investigation of a particular individual stimulus, etc., or a small group of individuals, objects, etc. When it comes to case study, the biggest mistake is to say it is any study of a single person. Firstly, it does not have to be of a single person, it can be of a group. So that's not the definition. Second thing is, if you don't mention detailed investigation or in-depth investigation, that's the very defining feature. You must mention that. Let's look at the next one. Rossio recorded the conversations with the patient as part of a case study. She also monitored the alcohol consumption of the patients in units of alcohol. 1 unit is 10 milliliter. The results are shown in the table. So we have the column of month and of total alcohol consumption in units. Now they're asking us describe using an example what is meant by qualitative data. So what's meant by quantitative data? This is for 2 marks. This is how a question can differ from a 1 marker. If it was 1 marker, just define quantitative, we didn't have to link back. Here they explicitly telling us you define what is quantitative data but link it back to Rossio's scenario. So simply first point will be definition in general and second point will be the link to Rossio. Quantitative data, as we know, is numerical data. First we'll give that definition and then we will specify that in this Rossio scenario, it's the total consumption of alcohol in numbers, in units. That's why that is quantitative data. That's all we need to do. So quantitative data is information collected from a study in number. In Rossio's case, the number of units of alcohol consumed is the quantitative data. There's nothing more to this, only one thing comes to my mind. Sometimes students give some unnecessary points like strengths or weaknesses. It's very objective, it's unbiased. They are not asking you for strengths or weaknesses. They just want you to identify in Rossio's case what is the quantitative data. When you give points which are unnecessary, first of all, if you're sacrificing main points for that, you lose marks. So if you're not identifying, just giving a strength, you're losing marks. Secondly, if you're giving it as an additional point, no credit is going to be given at all. You're not getting anything beyond 2 marks for giving a correct answer. So it's just going to be a waste of time. So when they're just asking you to link it to the situation, strictly do that. Don't do anything more than that. Okay, let's look at the next question from the same situation. Estimate the units of alcohol that the patient has reduced their consumption by between March and August. We need to look at the table again. Reduce their consumption by, meaning that some sort of subtraction will be required. Okay, if we look at the table, for March, the number of units is, let me come back to the table. For March, the number of units is 298. For April, it is 59. For April, it's August. They have asked August, sorry. For August, it is 59. So, reduced by, like I told you, that time only it's going to be subtraction. So, what we need to do is March minus August, because they want August compared to March, how much reduction has been. So, simply 298 minus 59. So let's come back to that space. I know the screen is not cooperating very much, like whatever edits I'm making here, it's not coming up on the screen, but I can't help it. That's why, as I've told you in the beginning, right now I can't re-record, I'm not having the time. I am going to put up this answer sheet on my website. So any confusions you're having, it's not refreshing at all. So any confusions you're having, please download the answer sheet from there. You can watch my video and you can keep the answer sheet in front of you. That will give you more clarity if you're not able to understand anything here. Okay, so for the estimation, like we just saw, we have to do the step. You will have to give 298 minus 59. Then it's up to you. You're using calculator or directly you can do it. Like if I do 298 minus 59. So if I just do 58 first, it comes to 240 and I subtract another one, it comes to 239. So I just like to do it mentally and put 239 here. Okay, next is for the months of March and April. Rossio recorded the patient's alcohol consumption each week. Her results are shown in the table. So we have the week in the first column and total consumption of units. Now what is different in this and the previous table? The first table was month wise. This table is week wise. Let's see what questions they want to ask us from here. They want us to calculate the mode for the units of alcohol consumed by the patient using table 3. Only advice I can give you, I know it's very simple. Only advice I can give is don't confuse mode, median, mean. Again, as obvious as it sounds, students do these things. So make sure you're not doing that. Okay, for mode, as far as calculation is concerned, there is nothing much to show. But still, I would suggest you write in one line, like I've been telling you from the beginning. The examiner should just know that you know how to calculate and that you're not copying answers. So, what I would suggest is you do mention that highest number of units. Like normally, like I've told you, you don't need to give wording. But for mode, because there's no any particular formula, we just look at the highest number of units. That's why for this one, I would insist that you do write this thing. Highest number of units is equal to 79, which I know it is in two places, like it is bimodal, because 79 we can see in March first week also and April first week also. But they're not asking us in which week it is more, or they're not asking us to indicate it's bimodal. We simply have to write 79, regardless of how many weeks it is coming in. So the final answer slot should have 79. Let's look at the next question. Calculate the median score for the units of alcohol consumed by the patient. This time they want median. For median, why they give 2 marks is because they want you to show the ordered data, ascending order or descending, whichever you prefer, usually ascending. That also carries 1 mark. So definitely first order the data and show, then only calculate the median. I'm keeping on referring back to the table. I'm not going back on the screen again and again. Here I'm directly showing you ascending. But what you have to do is look at the table like me, see which is the smallest number starting from there. Like write the smallest number, then one higher till you come to the last number. That is how I'm coming about it. So the smallest number I can see is 34, then 45, 63. So I have to arrange it that way. 34, 45, 63. Even if you're able to calculate directly, but show this. Then 70, 72, 77. And then the two 79s, which we had seen were the mode. Just make sure that you've covered as many numbers as given. So 8 numbers are there. From time to time, keep doing a little verification to make sure you're on track. Now, once we put data in ascending order to calculate the median, we have to consider how many total number of scores are there. Let me count. There are 8. Okay, I'm sorry. There are 9 because in no, there are 8 only. Right. So there are 8 numbers. Okay. When it comes to median, and I have to take for an even number, that's 8 number of total scores. It's going to be the average of the middle two numbers, which is going to be the median. So now what I have to do is, again, I have to show the step that I'm averaging, but how much working I want to show is up to me. So what I have to do is 70 plus 72 divided by 2, which is 142 divided by 2, which is 71. At a minimum, just show 70 plus 72 on 2. Remaining you want to show or not is on you. If you're directly after showing that step, you can put 71. Like just indicate to the examiner that you know you have to average the middle two scores for the median. And let's look at the last question for this section. One day in March, the patient drank a total of 12.81924 units of alcohol. Give the alcohol units rounded to 2 decimal places. This is only for 1 mark. So I can just write the number first again, 12.9181924. I have to consider what is on the third place. Why? Because they want me to round to 2 places. I'm just underlining that to show the examiner that I know that that is where I have to refer to. Now, besides the sound, to show anything or not is up to me. 9 is greater than 5, right? So that is why if the third position is greater than 5, the second position I will have to increase by 1. So therefore, second position plus 1. So second position is 1. I will have to add 1 to that. So 12.81 plus 1 I'm adding to that 1 means 12.81 plus 0.01, which is 12.82. If that third position number was less than 5, so it was 4 or 3 or something, then I would have kept it as 12.81. Here it's greater than 5, so I'm making it 12.82. Now coming to the 12 marker, which I've already told you, I won't do in details. I'll just specify which points are there, and you can write out the full answer. If you're not sure how to actually write it sentence by sentence, you can watch my other video. I'll link the playlist below in the description box and pinned comment. Rosenhan studied the way in which patients were treated in mental health hospitals. 8 confederate, meaning assistant observers, were able to get themselves admitted to different psychiatric wards in different hospitals using fake symptoms of mental health. They then conducted participant observations on the hospital wards. The Confederate observers took part in daily activities on the ward to fit in with the actual patient routines. They also watched how the staff interacted with the patients, making detailed notes in diaries of the events they observed. These notes included examples about patients' behaviors that had been misinterpreted by the staff. They also recorded how little time the nurses and doctors spent on the ward interacting with patients. None of the staff or patients on the wards were aware that observations were taking place. When the Confederate observers were taking notes and writing in their diaries in public, their behavior was interpreted as part of their mental health condition. Only the other patients in the ward showed any suspicion about the notes being taken by the Confederate observers. Evaluate the use of an observation to investigate human behavior. Okay, we know we have to give EU1 for 4 marks, EU2 for 4 marks, EU3 for 4 marks. Whether you need to integrate them or not is up to you, whether you want to give it as continuous or whether you like to keep them separate. My personal preference is for keeping them separate. So I like to give EU1, then EU2, and then EU3, 3 different paragraphs. More about this you can see in my detailed video on answering the 12 marker. So as of now, the layout which I'm going to give you is going to be 3 different paragraphs. Now the question is, we've learned so much about observation in the textbook. Which points to include in AO1? Which features to give? Give those which are related to the situation. Of course, you must begin with a general definition of observation. So you can specify that it's the research method which involves the watching and recording of behavior. Don't just say watching of behavior. Make sure to mention recording. Give a proper definition to get full marks. Besides that, what you should write about observation, they have mentioned participant observation. You should define. You can say there are many different types of observation, one of which is participant. Then you can define what is a participant observation. That will become your second point. This is when the researcher becomes involved or interacts with the participants who are being observed. I'm not talking about AO2 right now, that's why I'm not linking to this situation, Rosenhan's experiment. I will link it later. What else should we give? Observation also involves taking notes, recording of data. And notes can be made in any form. So you can give some examples of how notes can be made. It can involve written notes, transcriptions like writing books and diaries, or it can involve camera recording, audio recording. So you can just specify those things. And what else is relevant in the situation, we can see the types of behaviors that were being observed. It seems to be a structured observation, so you can elaborate on structured observation. And researchers have already planned what they want to observe, and that is exactly what they are observing. Let me see if there's anything else. No, then it's the results part. Yeah. Also, one more thing, none of the staff was aware about the observations. We have learned about covert and overt observations. We can say one more type of observation is a covert observation in which participants are unaware of being observed. So, what is in my EO1? General definition of observation, definition of the relevant types to this situation, participant, structured and covert, and a part about recording data for observations. Many forms can be there. Especially, I would emphasize on the written form because that's related to the situation. But as long as I'm writing the EO1 paragraph, I am not referencing EO2. So these are just going to be general definitions and explanations. Now coming to what I can write for AO2. In your case, it might be integrated with AO1. That's perfectly fine. I want to give it separately. It's only AO2. I'm not mixing AO3 in this. So strictly which features I've given in AO1, I'm just going to identify where they can be in the situation. They are seen in the situation. That's all. I'm not going to try to relate it with evaluation. Was it good or bad that they use that feature? That will come in AO3. So first I've mentioned generally observation. So in AO2 I can specify that in this case what is being observed. What is being observed is how patients are treated in mental health hospitals. Next I have specified participant observation. So in this study why I'm saying it is participant observation because the confederates actually got admitted to the hospital. That's how they got involved in the observation. Not only they got involved there, like admitted there, they started doing daily activities of the patients. So that's why it's a participant observation. So when I'm writing, I'll write this was a participant observation because the confederates got admitted and started doing daily activities with the patients. Recording of notes I have mentioned next. Here I can see that they wrote detailed notes in their diaries and how much time that also they wrote down. The nurses and doctors interacted with patients. So I have to specify because I've made a point on notes. What were the notes in this study? How was the recording done in this study? By maintaining these notes. Next in AO1, I've mentioned structured observation, meaning they were fixed on what type of behaviors they want to observe. This will look repetitive, but it's the same thing. They wanted to note firstly the notes of how they were being treated. So, how they were being treated in the hospital, that is one thing they had decided that they are going to write about. The second is interaction time with nurses and doctors. So, that's why it is structured. Then, coming to covert observation, why I'm saying it's covert because clearly they mentioned neither staff nor patients knew that some observation is taking place. So, that justifies covert observation. It's for 4 marks. Strictly, you have to give 4 points. I know I'm giving 5 points. That's excessive because I'm just making an outline and discussing with you. When you actually write the answer, reduce it, narrow down the number of points that you're giving. Now, coming to AO3 is observation good or bad? Give 2 Peel paragraphs. More on the Peel method. You want to know how to write Peel paragraphs? You can watch the detailed video. One strength, one weakness is what I recommend for balance. You can give 2 strengths or 2 weaknesses, but it won't be balanced. So, one strength in Peel format and one weakness in Peel format. Linking back to the situation is optional, but it's ideal. I would suggest whatever strength or weakness you're giving, you link it back. Also, should you give strength and weakness of observation overall or of a specific type, like participant covert? Up to you. You can give of any particular feature of observation and evaluation or of the overall method. So, when it comes to AO3, I would like to give the strength of observation as it can be very valid when it is covert observation. Because participants don't know they are being watched, so they don't show demand characteristics. I did not include in this, but I just like to make a mention. This is naturalistic observation, something you could have noted in EO1 and EO2 also, because they're doing it in the actual institutional settings. So if you've taken that, that would serve as a good evaluation point. Naturalistic is also very ecologically valid. But right now, let's focus on covert. Now, anyways, I'll have to give an example in the Peel format to explain this point. So why not give from this situation only? In that way, I'm writing an effective Peel point also, and I'm giving context back to the situation. So for this study, I would say because the staff and patients did not know they were being observed, any maltreatment that they were doing of the patients, that is, if they were depriving them of anything or punishing them in harsh ways, they could not hide that from the researchers because they had no idea they were being observed. So they could not show unnecessarily socially desirable behaviors, which increases validity. For a weakness, I would say that Observations do not help to establish cause-effect relationships. So that makes the scope of the study less wide than an experiment. For example, in this study, if they are to note that maltreatment is taking place of patients, not necessarily because of apathy on the part of doctors or nurses because they don't care about the patients, that's not something they are manipulating. So they cannot infer that that is the cause. They can just say that, okay, this is what is taking place in the hospitals. So a cause like apathy cannot be established in this study. There could be no number of other reasons why the patients are being ill treated. Could be something to do with the way this particular hospital has been set up, which might not be reflective of other hospitals, which would reduce validity. So, on one hand, covert observation is increasing validity by reducing demand characteristics. On the other hand, because observation as a whole does not have causal potential, that's why it is reducing the validity of the study. Number of other points are possible. I gave you one example, naturalistic, you could link to ecological validity. Participant observation, you could link to bias, how the patients were being treated personally, the confederates, that might have biased their opinion on how other patients are treated in the hospital. As long as it's anything related to observation, you can give it as a strength or weakness. Don't give general points like sample size was small, only one hospital was used. That's not specific to observational research method. Now, I really apologize. I know I've done the last question in a haste, but I'm not having time to discuss further. If you want a full explanation, I know I have told you before, just go to my other video in which I have explained in detail. So please refer to that one. This is suggestions I could give for now in the limited time that I have. I also apologize for the video quality in the sense what I was writing here was not getting updated on the screen. I'll take care in the future that it should be synced better. But I hope for now, whatever I have told you and how much you've been able to understand has been helpful to you in some way. So thank you so much for watching this video and let me know what else you would like to see. Okay, bye then and all the best for your preparation.